Do you ever just sit down and think to yourself, hey, I want to try sewing a scrunchie today, but you don't actually know how to make a scrunchie? Well, me too. Hi, my name is Annika, and I am a student maker here at the University of Nevada, Reno Innevation Center Makerspace. Today, I will be setting my sights on this sewing machine to sew a scrunchie out of an old shirt that I have. Let me introduce you to the fabric that we're going to be using.
This sea of yellow in all its polka dot speckled glory was found inside my closet as a courtesy of my dear grandma. I told her that I would wear this shirt, but I lied, so now I'm going to transform it into something I'll use. The top of the shirt is ruffled with the help of a couple bands of elastic, and the fabric itself is airy and loose. I think it makes the perfect material to use to make a scrunchie. So, a question everyone's been asking is, how am I going to make this into a scrunchie? Taking a look at the scrunchie that I already own, you can see that there are two places where stitches have been made. There's one long stitch made along the whole circumference of the scrunchie, I'll refer to it as stitch A, and a stitch that connects the inside of the scrunchie to the outside of the scrunchie, stitch B. If I imagine stitch B being undone, I can see a tube being made, and since we can't see the edges of the fabric, we know that the scrunchie is flipped inside out from where the stitches were made. With stitch A being undone, you can imagine that it would just be a rectangular piece of fabric. So now we know that we need to cut out a rectangle from our fabric and sew it along the long side of the rectangle to make a tube. We need to sew it in a way where the sides we want hidden are on the outside of the tube so that we can flip it inside out and hide the stitches that we've made. Placing the scrunchie on my wrist, we know that it fits comfortably and snug. The elastic I use should fit about the same. For me to make this, I'll need a soft ruler, fabric shears, a sewing machine with matching thread, a seam ripper, and something to make marks on my fabric, like a Sharpie or tailor's chalk, in addition to the old shirt that I have. Now that we have all our tools, my first step is to get the elastic from the shirt. I'm doing this by using the seam ripper to rip open the seams, attaching the elastic to the fabric. I ended up taking out the whole elastic band since I wasn't exactly sure how much elastic I needed for the scrunchie. After separating the elastic from the shirt, I wrapped it around my wrist to measure out how long I needed the scrunchie to be, making sure to leave some extra elastic so I could sew the band together. I measured it to be about 7 inches long, and in hindsight, I could have measured my wrist before taking out all of the elastic to save me some time, but sometimes it is what it is. Since the scrunchie is so small, I didn't really need all the fabric that the shirt had to offer, so I flipped the shirt inside out and started cutting out a chunk of the fabric. I struggled a bit to try and figure out how big of a rectangle to actually make. At first I thought that I would just make the rectangle the same length of the elastic, but then I realized that it wouldn't work out because there would be no room for the elastic to stretch. So I played around with my model a little bit more, and I thought that if I stretched it out, I could get the true length of the fabric. I found that it was about 16 inches long, and my fabric measured out to be about 15.5 inches, but I figured that it was okay because there is still an excess amount of fabric to allow the elastic to stretch. To visualize the scrunchie more, I used clips to make a tube and ran the elastic along the inside of it to see if it worked out. In the end, it looked enough like a scrunchie to let me know I was going in the right direction. The next thing I decided to do was cut off one of the rough edges of the fabric with a straight cut. I started doing this with a rotary cutter on a wood surface, and as you can see by my reaction, this wasn't the best of ideas since I accidentally marked the wood. Moving to a table meant specifically for cutting things on, I finished cutting one of the rough edges with the help of a rotary cutter and fabric shears, but mostly fabric shears. The fabric was beginning to look like a nice rectangle, so to finish it off, I measured the diameter of a scrunchie I have and found that it was about 2.5 inches. I measured out a width of 3 inches for the rectangle that was being cut out to make sure that there was some seam allowance. I marked 3 inches from the top of the rectangle, and I used the table markings to cut out a straight line. Folding the rectangle in half with the side I wanted to hide showing on the outside, I used clips to keep the tube folded together. I sewed the tube together really quick with the help of a sewing machine. I used a straight stitch and made sure to backstitch both at the beginning of the tube and at the end of the tube. I didn't have a turning tool or a safety pin to help turn the tube inside out, so I ended up using my hands, which took a while, but I eventually got there. After turning the tube inside out, I attached the clip to the elastic and fed it through the tube. I made sure that both ends of the elastic were outside of the fabric and sewed the ends together. I stretched it a bunch of times to make sure that it was secure. When I thought the elastic was securely sewed together, I put one end of the tube inside the other, and for the edge of the tube that was still showing, I folded it inwards so that the rough edges were hidden. As a final step, I sewed the tube ends together and made sure that it was secure. Here's the final product. I think it looks pretty good for a beginner like myself. The only thing I didn't really know how to do was hide the seams that go from the inside of the tube to the outside of the tube. It's always nice to try new things and make mistakes in the process. I guess that's why they say enjoy the journey and not the destination. I think. Anyway, if you're watching this and you're also new at sewing, I challenge you to also try making a scrunchie or anything your heart desires. Contact us at the Innovation Center Makerspace if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.